Land of Eim is finally here, and I want to talk about it. So, I have been waiting such a long time to receive Land of Eim. I backed the original Kickstarter in July of 2024, and it is currently March of 2025, and I got it only a few days ago. So, it's been a long wait on this Kickstarter, and I have had faith the entire time because I have been in love with Land of Eim since the day that I saw the original ad, which was saying here's basically a game that combines the Muppets with Lord of the Rings. What the heck? I think that is such a weird idea, and that's initially what got me intrigued in the game. And then the game is basically this like light-hearted, whimsical fantasy game where you play a bunch of little guy heroes who are, going about Land of Eim in like this dungeon era where there's these big corporations and stuff, which is like kind of like the dungeoneering thing. There are dungeons that obviously you can go into and loot. You're solving puzzles, you're chasing after rumors, you're helping people, like you're doing all of these things as this hero. And it's just this, again, lighthearted fantasy. And as you can see, like Land of Eim, the art style really captures the whole aesthetic of the game. And so, like, I'm just super excited about this and I want to talk about it. So, we're going to do kind of like a flip through video here where I'm just going to show you parts of the book. I'm going to talk about parts of the book. I'm going to talk about things that I like. And not only are we doing the core book, which is what I have here, but we are also doing the beastiary. And finally, the sandbox setting, which is a super chunky book, especially when you compare it to the other two. So starting out with Land of Eim, here's the cover, and then immediately when you flip over the book, the kind of like in between sheets of the cover photo and actually starting the book is a whole quick reference sheet. It tells you here's the rules that you need to know about the dice, here's how certain things work, like just like, here's how you fish, here are the results when you fish, like when you roll to fish, here's what you get if you get, a 6 or a 12 plus and things like that. The first thing I will say is that Land of Eim actually uses a D12 dice system, which I think is really fun. I don't think enough games actually use a D12 system. So I'm always happy when I see alternate dice mechanics in games because, like, more justice to some of the other dice. D12, D10s, give them some justice. Even though I don't like D10s because I used to make dice and there are 2 of them in a set, which means that I just felt like I was working on the same die over and over and over again. So this is the layout of like the basics, and the basics is pretty self-explanatory. It's just talking about the core rules of the game. Here's how the game actually functions and works. And I love that they actually have QR codes in this game. Land of Eim actually has a fantastic support website that has basically everything you need on it and a whole bunch of random dice generators. So if you're wanting to play Land of Eim and you don't really want to like make everything up yourself, or you have digital versions of the books and want like just some easier roll tables and stuff like that, the website actually has those and it makes it like super easy to use. I've generated several dungeons using the website and I would highly recommend it. It'll be linked in the description of this video because I want to share. It goes through the dice mechanics, and the cool thing about Land of Eim, in my opinion, is the fact that it's a tiered success system, which means that if you roll a 1 or 2, you get a complete failure. If you roll a 3 to a 5, you get a failure with a plus, a 6 to an 8, a success with a twist, a 9 to a 10, just a full success, and then a 12 is a complete success, which usually means a little bit of a bonus thing happens. I love Powered by the Apocalypse, so any other games that have tiered like success mechanics I think is really cool personally. They also go through all the skills, which I just want to say I love the names of the skills too. Vim, Vigor, Knack, and Know-How, like being the skills of the game, I think is really awesome. But what I really want to show you is character creation. So we start out with this really great artwork and stuff. I just appreciate like all of the art in this book. I think it's super cute. Now in Land of Eim, at least so far, there are 6 classes in this game, which feels maybe a little limiting, but the way that the classes work, I think there leaves a lot of wiggle room to make each of the classes different from each other and different each time that you would play it too. And I'll go into a little bit of that soon, but I do think it would also be really easy to homebrew your own classes in Land of Eim. So I really wouldn't worry about the limited classes because I feel like after playing like once or twice, you could definitely make some of your own classes. But the classes that are in the base book here is the Bard, the Dungeoneer, the Gnome, the Knight Errant, the Loyal Chum, and the Rascal. And I'll tell you up front, the Loyal Chum is my favorite. But I really like the Bard abilities, but I love the Loyal Chum as a class concept. And basically, the Bard is, fantasy Bard. You tell stories, you perform, you do things like that. And a lot of the abilities follow that. The Dungeoneer, you're just really into dungeoning. You're always prepared. The whole, trick of this class is the fact that you actually have, a team and actual NPCs and stuff that follow you. Like one of the abilities is just having a bunch of basically little imps that help you that you can just say, hey, go down this hallway and see if there's any traps, and they just will do that. And they also can't die, and so you can comically kind of explain how they get out of these situations and stuff. It's really cute. The Gnome, which is both a class and a folk that you can play. The gnome is basically the magic caster of this game. There's not really a lot of magic in Land of Eim, at least compared to D&D. I would say that it's closer to Adventure Time and stuff. It's low magic, and the magic in the game is even just more whimsical. You don't have these large spells and stuff that you cast. It's more little tricks and things like that. And the gnome is the one class that casts magic. You do have some more spelly type things that the bard can do, but the gnomes are the only ones that actually cast magic in a more traditional sense. The Knight Errant is just a knight paladin. You have a steed. You just love this whole life of being a knight and fighting things and all of that. The Loyal Chum is a support character. You basically help the party, get things done, you take consequences and stuff for the party, things like that. But you actually pick one person in the party to be your best friend, and I just think that's so fun and really cute, and it reminds me kind of the Jake and Finn type dynamic. Jake, I feel, is a loyal chum through and through. And then, of course, we have the Rascal, which is basically a rogue. You get up to shenanigans, you sneak away from things, you cause trouble and mischief, cute stuff like that. And these are the only classes, like I said. And the way that the classes, though, work is really fun because when you start Land of Eim, you start at level 1 and you get 2 abilities. And when you level up, you actually get to choose one of those 2 abilities that stays the entire time that you play this character. And then level 2, you get the 2 abilities that come with level 2. And you keep both of those, plus that previous ability that you chose. And then when you level up again, you choose one of the 2 level 2 abilities, or that previous level 1 ability to keep forever. And then you get the 2 abilities from level 3. And so it's this fun way of you get to actually test the abilities and bonuses that you get from this class. You get to test that out in play, actually use it, before you decide this is the one I want, which I think is such a great mechanic. I would love to see that in D&D and other games more, where it's hey, you can actually test out these abilities, in-game before actually committing to something. Because I feel there's a lot of times where it's I really want to play this type of warlock, but you get no chance to actually really test out how that subclass works or anything like that. And then you're stuck with it for the rest of the time that you're playing, unless your GM is gracious enough to let you change, which every time that I run a game, I'm hey, we'll play a few sessions. If you find that you don't jive with this character, you can switch it out. But I love that that's just baked into Land of Eim. Now, I won't get into all the abilities that the different classes have in this game because that would be a super long time, but I do want to spotlight this one that I think is really cool and sets the tone of just what Land of Eim has to offer. In terms of the mechanics, and that is the ability called the narrator from the bard. The narrator says, bards tend to sing about the actions surrounding them. Inspired check. Once every session, narrate a desired outcome of a single action or situation, beginning with the phrase, and then, with a +1 bonus for rhyming, which I love. To make it happen, this ability can't affect combat or instantly solve something very complicated. The GM should apply the limited outcome rule if used too broadly. What I love is that they have an example scenario. So, for the scenario, it's a companion is trapped across a deep chasm. Now, here's a way that you can use this ability. The PC solution. And then Morty bounced like a deer. In a moment, he was there, and now he's over here. I love that so much. I love that so much. I think it's so fun and creative, and like what I love about Land of Eim is that it is just fun. It's just full of fun. All the mechanics put like the player adding to the story first. The mechanics put the players adding in fun and wacky situations first before combat. Even the way that combat works, you get to parlay with your enemy before you get to actually attack. Every other action besides attacking goes first. Attacking is the last thing that you can do in combat. And I think that is just absolutely perfect. And again, kind of gives to that Adventure Time feel, because like in that show, you're trying to work things out usually a little bit more peacefully. You know, they do attack and they do get into fights, but there's other goofy situations that happen usually beforehand. And I just think that's really great. And I love this game and I love it. So the next thing I want to talk about is all of the folk. There are a variety of different characters that you can play that all come with their unique quirks and traits and abilities that they get. And some of my favorites are the mushroom and the skeleton and the gelatinous goo. Like, solid characters. I want to play as a mushroom. I want my team to be a mushroom, a skeleton, and a gelatinous goo. That sounds awesome. And again, it just adds into that wackiness. And I think the kinds of characters and folk that you get to play in this game is where they get like kind of that Muppet thing, like, you know, the Muppets meets Lord of the Rings. It's because like all of the characters are just kind of like these creatures and like little guys that you get to play, and it kind of fits that same vibe as the Muppets have. Now, I won't get too far into like the character creation and stuff, but I do want to talk about the fact that there's ideals and flaws, which D&D has this mechanic, but what I like about Land of Eim is they actually like reinforce it more. When you pick your ideals and flaws, you actually pick, let's see if I can get an example here. So for the loyal chum, here's a flaw. Fall for someone's lies or tricks. So you're gullible, you're easily tricked, and things like that. And so when you actually play into your flaws in Land of Eim, you get experience points. When you play into your ideals in Land of Eim, you get experience points. The way that you level up is primarily roleplay based, and that is by expressing your ideals and your flaws, by telling things about your backstory, by connecting with other characters. And then there's a few other things like finding new monsters and things like that that will get you XP. But there's no way of getting XP through killing a creature like it is in D&D. And I love also the fact that ideals and flaws have some sort of mechanical value in Land of Eim, because in D&D, what are ideals and flaws? I think people said that traditionally you would actually get inspiration points if you played into an ideal or a flaw. But in Land of Eim, it is actually baked into the game that you get something when you lean into these character traits. You lean into these things that you said, this is what my character is. And it's XP, and then you get to level up. And so I just think that's really great. I love the way that they handle it compared to D&D. You know, I've played a lot of D&D. I have D&D on my shelf back there. I don't hate D&D, but I love when other games take similar ideas and express it and use it in a way that I think just fits so much better and gives more substance to the game itself. Because like I've always felt like flaws and ideals didn't mean anything in D&D. And also in Land of Eim, you get to have relationships with characters, and there's a whole bunch of like charts and stuff that you can like pick out relationships, but also you can make up your own. And the last bit of the book, I mean, like the character creation is obviously a big part, but then we have a whole thing about, you know, items and weapons and inventory and technology and like buying things. And most of these are just roll tables with prices and other information like that, which I think is great. I love that there's so much support in these games, or in Land of Eim itself. Like they have roll tables and tons of tables in general just for items and weapons and things like that. You can craft in this game. They have a bunch of roll tables for components and where you can find them. They have a whole thing for fishing. Like there's all of these like extra little things that you can do in the game that they actually have. and roll tables for. And it's all to give the GM support, which I love. And, you know, a huge thing with Land of Eim as well is that it is kind of this exploration hex crawly type game. So having a lot of these roll tables really helps support that style of play and guide you through it. We're going to talk about the beastiary, and I'm going to show you some of the monsters that I think are really cool because there's some awesome monsters here, and a little bit about how they work because I think that's really cool. And the first thing is the fact that in Land of Eim, there are like 3 tiers of monsters slash adversaries, enemies, whatever. And those are the goons, the bruisers, and the champions. The goons are kind of that lower level, like, you know, a bandit in D&D. It's like 1 or 2 hits away. They're supposed to mostly be, they're larger fights in terms of there's a lot of them. They're easy to take down. They're not too serious, you know. And then you have a bruiser, which is a guy that's a little bit more serious. You know, he's going to take a while to actually take down. You're going to have to fight for a bit. He's going to do a bit of damage and all of that. And then we have the champion, who is like more of like the boss, the bad guy. Like this is like the highest level of the adversaries. That is the most serious enemy to go up against. And so they're going to be the toughest to defeat. They're going to be the toughest to fight. And I really like this because it kind of simplifies like picking like enemies for combats and stuff. And it also works in a way that you can apply a goon, bruiser, champion tag to any monster, and it just changes some of its stats and the information that it has. So each monster is independent, and then you get to decide, is this a bruiser, is this a champion, is this a goon, and go from there, which I think is really fun. And it also makes it really easy to create your own monster or enemy in Land of Eim. Now, just starting off with showing just some of the cool artwork in this game. Look how awesome that is. Look at this bee. This bee is awesome. Like, I have flipped through the beastiary book of Land of Eim so many times because, you know, I backed the Kickstarter, and so I got every update when they made the digital versions of the books, and so I would always, like, check them and be like, oh my god, I'm so excited, and just flip through it like crazy. And so, like, I'm so familiar with, like, quite a few of these monsters and stuff. I don't usually remember their names because they have a bunch of funky names. But I just love the monsters here. Like, for example, we have this page here, which has a darkling and what does it say? A curdle snail? Look at these guys. I love the idea of the darkling because it's basically like a shadow monster. It just follows you and takes over your shadow and kind of like stalks you. So that's like super scary. What I love too about each of these monster entries is that they give like a little bit of like backstory / context to like what this monster is, what they do. And a lot of the times they give them like social mechanics and they give them like motivation and stuff like that. So when you are going into combat, because again, this game doesn't like to solve everything just through fighting. They want to solve things through talking it out. They want to solve things through creative ways. It gives you a lot of information to support some other styles of just like knocking out a encounter. And that may be through talking it out. I played a game of Land of Eim. I ran the pre-written situation of the chicken-footed witch. And in my game, the chicken-footed witch, who was like kind of the bad guy in that one shot, was, you know, she was kind of evil. She was cursing everyone, and she was defeated by one of the characters telling her about the chicken dance. Now, that was significant because she really wanted to be a dancer again, because she got cursed with chicken feet. And so then she was just kind of stumbling around and she couldn't dance the way that she wanted to before. But one of the characters told her about the chicken dance, taught her the chicken dance, and said there's a place that you can go and do this dance, and it's widely accepted. And that changed everything for her. And she's like, oh, wait, I'm sorry. Now that I know this dance, I'm happy again. Like, it's just kind of silly. And I love that. But that situation worked because they added so much about the chicken-footed witch that, hey, you know, she has this motivation to dance again. This is what she really wants to do. This is why she's cursing people, because she was cursed. And so, like, it just adds more context to all these situations, so then you can then solve them in a creative way. We also have this dryad here, which he's really awesome. I love these fungules so much. I'm a huge fan of mushrooms and things like that. Like, You know, the shirt that I'm wearing right now is a mushroom with a dye on it. I love mushrooms. Those are my little guys. Those are my favorite guys. I also just love some of, like, they do like fun takes on things. So like we have like this Gelpy, but we also have this ghost, and I just love how the ghost looks in the artwork, and I love their interpretation of it. You know, they're saying that they're rare, so they're not things that come up very often. And then look, they have social stats, and they have like social information and things like that. Here's in their social info here. Every ghost persists for a reason. Getting to the bottom of the reason usually de-escalates any ghostly encounter. Possible reasons include that their remains were not properly buried, they still have unfinished business, or some horrible tragedy occurred. Like, that's how ghosts work in quite a bit of media, but that can be easy to forget about when you are playing a game sometimes and trying to run an encounter. And so having it right there, give your ghost a reason why they're still around. That immediately lets you figure that out and then give another way to solve this combat. Give another way to solve this situation. I love it. And then we have things like the gloom. Now, the gloom is basically just a regional foggy effect that's just like kind of sucky. I also have to shout out my Kaleidoscorpions here. These are one of the enemies that my players fought when I ran the Land of Eim one-shot, and they stabbed some of the characters, and it didn't go very well. The handler of these scorpions was just this kind of crazy guy. It was a wild time. But, you know, there's so many more monsters and enemies and all kinds of stuff in this game that, again, I would recommend you check it out, please, so that you can actually see them all for yourself. But we're going to move on to the sandbox setting, aka the biggest book. Now, I'm not usually one to really hop on setting books, mostly because they tend to have like a pre-written adventure that goes with them. They tend to have like something that follows with them, or they're not really themes that I particularly enjoy. But I really like the goofy, whimsical fantasy of Land of Eim. I love that so much, and so the setting book for me has been like, this is what I want from all setting books. This is exactly what I want. And they give you all these locations, they give you all of these like rumors and NPCs, and they do it in a way that leaves so much open for you to flesh out yourself. Every game of Land of Eim is going to be different, especially because a lot of it is traveling and like kind of this hex crawly thing. And so most of the time you're running random encounters and finding random rumors and quests that people give you, and going to different places each time because there's so many places to go. I think it's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 large locations for you to go in Land of Eim. That's a lot, and it's going to take a while to do just one of them. And so there's a lot of possibility in Land of Eim on what to explore. Now, I'm just going to spotlight one of the locations just, again, to keep this brief, but the first one, the Drippy Downs. This is a place of rolling green fields and where magic still is kind of persisting a little bit. There's trolls and other magical creatures and gnomes and stuff like that that live here. And one of my favorite parts is like the troll part. A lot of the locations here have to do with trolls and actually paying troll tolls and stuff to get to places. I think that's just really fun. Here's a settlement. The Asmith's outpost is the location. I love the way that they write these out because they give you a little blurb of information of like what this place is and just like an overview of it. But then they have what's currently going on in this location, which I love because if you show up there, this is what's going on right now. And then they have a whole thing on sights and sounds. And so this is just, you entered into the city, you entered into this outpost, I guess is the proper term. And it has a whole list of sights and sounds. When you are describing this place to your players, you can pull from this list. This is what you're seeing, this is what you're hearing. And it just sets the stage for you. And I think that's really great. And then they have like a list of a couple of rumors that are spreading around town. So when your players are, you know, socializing with NPCs and like getting to know some information and stuff, this is what they're hearing. Here's an idea of what they're hearing, and it usually associates with the town itself or something nearby. Quests, and quests are actually divided into 3 different categories. We've got hijinks, dear and do, and doom and gloom. So hijinks are like these fun, goofy, more adventure time style quests where like they're just kind of fun, not really in mortal danger, like nothing super serious. And they say in the book that these are kind of inspired by the Muppets, Labyrinth, and Adventure Time, which I feel is pretty accurate. And then you have Daring Do. These ones are more dangerous and daring, like heroic type quests, but usually like not end of the world, anything like that. They're not like super heavy. They usually have also good challenges that you have to complete to, complete the goal. And these are more inspired by Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and The Princess Bride, which I love The Princess Bride being used as a descriptor because I can, again, imagine what they mean by that. Then we have Doom and Gloom. These are darker, more spookier type quests, things that are going to challenge your characters a little bit more, maybe have a little bit more mortal danger there, and all of that. And these are inspired by more Dark Crystal, Conan the Barbarian, and Mad Max, which those are some of the inspirations that they talk about in this game. And that's if you really lean into this more doom and gloom, because like the dungeoning era was brought into by the Gloom King and stuff like that. So there are some of these darker themes there that you can further explore, or you can have a lot more fun, or you can kind of do heroic adventures. You can kind of pick the tone of your game through these quests, which I really like. And then every time that they give you quests in the setting book, they give you the quest with then that little tag of what kind of quest this is. So if you have a specific tone that you're wanting for your game, and let's say you want the hijinks tone, you can look at the list and be like, okay, this one's a hijinks tone, and maybe that's the quest that you present to your players. Or you have it open to everything and present them the different options. Do you want to go on a more fun quest? Do you want to go on a bit more of a heroic quest? Or do you want to go into a little bit spookier things? Things that are more apocalyptic in this situation, because there are kind of apocalyptic themes in Land of Eim, but they're not like the core of the game, unlike something like Apocalypse World, which is, Apocalypse World. It's going to be apocalyptic. All of the different entries in the setting book are all written out in a similar way. They give you these NPCs and blurbs about the location and quests and rumors and all of this information to play off of. And I love it. I want to flip through this. I don't know if I'm going to ever run the actual setting book, but I'm highly tempted to, or at least to start out with. Maybe pick a settlement or a location, be like, hey, we're going to play something here, and then we're just going to random encounter our way through the game. And so I love that idea, and I think I probably will maybe run something, even if it is short, just to use this book because I really like it. I like it as a setting book, I like it as an adventure book, and I think it's really awesome. So that's all that I have for you today. I didn't want this to be super long, and we'll see how long it is after editing, but these are all of the books of Land of Eim. If you do want to buy Land of Eim for yourself, I believe it is on pre-order right now, and I will put a link in the description on where you can find it, the website, the pre-order site, and all of that good stuff, because I want more people to get Land of Eim because I think it's a really awesome game. That is it for today. I hope that you enjoyed. If you did, like and subscribe to the RPG Goblin, because I really appreciate it. I like talking about TTRPGs, and knowing that other people like to hear that makes my absolute day. So that is it for today, and I will be back at some point to talk about more games. So bye.